And now to my conversation with Amanda Knox about justice in America, high-profile cases making headlines, Black Lives Matter, the police, and her own exoneration in the killing of her overseas roommate. Since then, she has authored a book and has begun hosting a podcast and Facebook show called The Truth About True Crime. She's advocating for a renewed focus on fairness for defendants, while acknowledging advocates on all sides of hot-button issues could benefit from a timeout for self-reflection. Amanda, you as an American were exonerated of a murder in Italy. Are there parallels to your case in the American justice system?
Oh my gosh, so many. It's hard to count how many. I think that the criminal justice system throughout the world, and particularly here in the United States, is often thwarted by a number of different issues within the criminal justice system. I mean, what we're looking at is a system where prosecutors, law enforcement, police, investigators are not incentivized to find the truth. They're incentivized to win. They're incentivized to find answers and tie a neat little bow on societal problems. And that means that there is inevitably going to be people who can't afford the kind of justice that they deserve and the kind of defense that they deserve, becoming victims of the criminal justice system here and abroad.
When you talk about affording that sort of defense they deserve, are you talking about lawyers' fees? We have public defenders, of course, or is it getting into forensics and other things that cost a lot more money?
Absolutely. I mean, it comes to all of those things, right? So public defenders, we know, are not given the resources and funding they need to actually provide the service that their clients deserve, especially considering the kind of resources that we make available to prosecutors. Beyond that, what is necessary to these days to prove one's innocence is forensic testing, we need all of these very expensive resources that most people do not have available to them. It's a common problem that if you can afford someone to do the proper investigation, you have a chance of justice in our criminal justice system.
And the key word, I think, there was proper investigation, because courts have to authorize some degree of investigation. States set aside money for defendants who don't have the money to pay otherwise to actually pay for those services up front. The question is, are they sufficient?
Right. And also, are the state entities being incentivized to pursue all of the available leads that are available to them? Are they following where the evidence is leading them, or are they pursuing only evidence to confirm a theory that they can then present to a court?
When Law&Crime Daily returns, Amanda Knox on the hit true crime series Tiger King and her stern warning for the audience. The conversation continues in just a moment. And now to more from my conversation with murder exoneree Amanda Knox, who has turned her attention toward advocacy for defendants finding themselves in the same situation she was once in. Knox identifies with protesters against overzealous prosecutors and police brutality, but believes it's unfair to characterize police officers as a whole as evil. The Black Lives Matter movement and protests across the country have changed the conversation about the role of the police. What's your assessment of the alleged acts of the police and the response from the communities as you look at these protests big picture?
It's so important that these conversations are finally happening. It's a shame that it's taken this long. And I share the protesters' sense of urgency that these issues need to be addressed now. We need to address the root causes of crimes, and we need to remember to be cautious against any kind of us versus them mentality. Us versus them mentality is the root of police brutality, because the police have otherized whole communities that they don't view as people that they are there to protect, but to protect against. And we should resist any kind of language that also otherizes police officers, that is not taking into account their humanization as well. We need to look at the incentives and root causes of all these social dysfunctions and address them directly.
Knox's opinions on current social issues are influenced, of course, by her own case. She talked about what she says went wrong in Italy a decade ago and about a few other high-profile people claiming their own innocence these days.
The police are not doing things because of malicious intent. I don't think that that's what's happening. I think what the police are doing is they're following the path of least resistance, and they're finding the person who is most vulnerable to manipulation, basically. So they found me, they saw me in a vulnerable state. They saw that I had no one there to protect me, to stand by me. My parents weren't there. I was alone. And I was pushed to the point where I broke, basically. I told the police again and again and again everything that I knew. They didn't accept that I didn't know anything more than what I was saying. And they pushed me to the point where I began to believe what they told me, which was that I had amnesia and didn't remember all of the things that I knew about the crime.
It seems like a far-fetched theory by the police.
Oh, certainly. Well, I mean, I think that when I was going through my interrogation, the police didn't know what happened. Okay. They thought that I knew what happened. Okay. And they thought that there was some kind of sex game that went awry because there had been evidence that my roommate had been assaulted sexually, and that somehow I might know who might have done it, that I might have been involved. And if I, a young woman with no criminal record, were involved, then it must be some kind of horrendous sex game. That's the theory. And it all derived from trying to force me into a sexual assault murder equation that I certainly did not fit into. Prosecutors and law enforcement are incentivized to win at all costs, to not admit fault. And in order to do so, they basically railroad innocent people.
Speaking of innocence, a lot of high-profile people in true crime series are professing theirs. So, big question, should Joe Exotic from Tiger King be pardoned?
Be pardoned? Let's see. I mean, so I don't want to make any strong claims about any case that I have not personally looked into. I have not personally looked into the Joe Exotic case. I saw a documentary like many of us saw, and my simple reaction to that case was actually in response to Carol Baskin and the number of people who saw a documentary and made a claim about how Carol Baskin killed her husband. And I found that it was irresponsible for anyone to be going around claiming that someone killed their husband because they happened to see a documentary series. That's not enough to actually make any kinds of claims of guilt or innocence.
As to Carol Baskin specifically, when she says she had nothing to do with her husband's disappearance, do you believe her?
I think that there is enough circumstantial evidence to pursue an investigation, but as far as what was presented to within the documentary, I can't say either way if I believe her or not. All journalists and all prosecutors and, are all going to be presenting evidence to you from a certain perspective. And their perspective is informed by the information and the research that they've done, but that doesn't mean that their perspective should necessarily be yours. It's important to hear the other side, to weigh the evidence, and to give it, if you want to make a claim or an assertion, any kind of conviction needs to have the amount of context and homework done that most people don't want to do, frankly.
Your work generally encourages people to reflect on criminal cases by looking beyond headlines, to not rush to judgment. It sounds like that's basically what you're suggesting here.
Absolutely. I mean, these are real people's lives. And it's easy to forget that when we see someone's face on the front page and their name in a headline. These are human beings just like you and me, and they deserve, no matter what they've done, every benefit of the doubt and every protection that our state has to offer.
Amanda Knox, thanks for the conversation.
Thank you.